Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Prof. Rocco, for starting with that powerful presentation. Um, so I'm just going right into the presentation. But maybe as a starting point or as the vantage point, um, my presentation really is talking about African digital humanities, um, and with particular focus on context, case studies, and community-centered practices. But I see it as imperative to situate this particular presentation within two contexts. I think the fundamentals of DH, where we contextualize or situate African digital humanities within the context of the geographies of digital humanities, where we are talking about the spatial distribution of digital humanities in as far as DH projects are concerned, DH centers, DH associations, DH degrees, departments, DH labs, and so forth. So when I designed, MA in Digital Humanities at the University of Zimbabwe in 2020, there was a question that I was asked when I was creating or designing the degree program, that what kind of an animal is digital humanities? And others said, Reggemore, you have started, you're creating things which doesn't exist. So it then motivated me to embark on a study that I called, the geographies of digital humanities, where I wanted to look at where is digital humanities? Where do we find, DH centers? Where do we find, DH degrees, DH projects, and I went on to, to develop a data set for that. And then I created an application that I was calling GeoDH. Because, I wanted to prove to people that I was dealing with that digital humanities exist. One of the fascinating things that fascinated me at that time was that by the year 2013, America had 65 digital humanities centers, and UK had about 19 by 2013. In Japan had about 7. But the striking difference that shocked me was that Africa at that time had only 2 digital humanities centers, and it provoked me to say we need to be part of this world, of digital humanities. So I had to study the curriculum of various universities across, the world, in order to create, a most convincing curriculum for MA in Digital Humanities at the University of Zimbabwe. So that's the context that led me to look at the geographies of digital humanities. So we have to situate, African digital humanities within the context of these geographies. And the geographies, show that Africa is still, lagging behind in terms of the DX centers, in various DH activities as compared with other, continents. And it's a starting point that help us, to know how we need to move, with both speed and intellectual, capacity, and know our condition as we move forward. So it's also very important as a starting point that we need to define what we mean by digital humanities. In fact, there are so many definitions of digital humanities, and because digital humanities is ever evolving, and it's not a discipline. It's not a discipline that is closed. It's very open, and advocate for plural. A conceptualization of things. There is a handle on X, which is called DH defined, which has got more than 7,000 definitions of DH, and they have also an application that is powered with a data set in GitHub, which put these definitions in cycle, and even on X is the same thing. But the understanding.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your slide has been in one position since. Probably you don't know. So we have not been anything except the opening slide.
Yeah. I haven't moved.
I don't think he has moved this slide.
Sorry.
Go on, sorry.
I haven't moved it. Because I want to make sure that people have an understanding of the background, because we have different people from different backgrounds. It helps us to have an understanding of DH or of digital humanities. So I was saying, one common thread is that when we're talking about digital humanities, essentially we're talking about the digitization of humanities. And we are also talking about the humanization of the digital. So it's a dual process where we are talking about how can we digitize, the various facets of humanities, from language, from philosophy, from linguistics, and so forth. And in that process, you can see that digital humanities is interdisciplinary in scope, and methodological in nature. So, we usually focus much on, the how part of things. How do we analyze, text, and how do we come up with a tool that we can use to analyze those texts? So we are, in most cases, coming up with tools for various things, for various fields. And I'm glad that my professor there and brother Rockwell, made reference to Voyant tools. And in that context, you can see that Voyant tools are a tool for analyzing text, as you explain, I think in the coming lecture. So I think with that particular background, we get now into this presentation so that you can actually see what is happening in Africa in as far as digital humanities is concerned. So I take an inclination towards the idea of rethinking the knowledge in the context of the digital age. So you can see at my first slide, we need to have an understanding of the landscape of African digital humanities. What do we have? And in that, in that context, it's important that we understand that African DH is, shaped by local histories in various regions and various countries as well. I'll give you an example. In South Africa, they have what is called SADELA. And SADELA is South African digital, it's a South African language, digital resource, center, where they are focusing on digitizing South African languages. And it's a national institution that is funded directly by their government. So you can see that, that particular DH center, SADELA, is influenced by, the idea of digitizing indigenous languages in South Africa. And that's their inclination. And it's also shaped by the linguistic reality in South Africa, where they are dealing with a history of development of most indigenous languages within the context of the digitization of African languages and other indigenous languages. So they set up that center at Northwest University. And I'm glad to have interacted with colleagues from that university as well as the center. So you can see that, particular inclination. And I'm very much, intrigued, even by the establishment of DASA, or what is called, Digital-Humanities Association of Southern Africa, which is DASA. And DASA, if you look at DASA, the people who started, DASA, mainly they are coming from South Africa, because that's where you see the first, Digital Humanities, Association, and even the first Digital Humanities Center in the context of SADELA. And you also see activities of DH even in what is called the Husuntula, retreat, where you have computer scientists and linguists. They meet annually to talk about the NLP projects. And they've been involved even in the projects which are called the Masakane, projects, which have been led by Professor, Marivate Vikosi. And, very interesting activities happening there. But apart from that, you also see, my brothers in Nigeria, where you have done, the Digital-Humanities Association of Nigeria. And activities have also been happening in various universities in Nigeria, University of Lagos, and other universities there. So you see the coming in of various African countries coming in into the DH world. Apart from that, you also have at University of Zimbabwe the establishment of MA in Digital Humanities in 2020, and those are some of the activities that are taking place in the context of Africa, and of particular interest has been the curriculum of MA in Digital Humanities at the University of Zimbabwe, in which one of the modules is centered on community projects, where students they identify a community, problem in the community, whatever community that particular student identifies, and comes up with a digital humanities, inspired, a solution to deal or to analyze or to interrogate or to solve that particular, problem, or to document that particular, problem, or see a particular gap within that particular community, and begins to work on a particular, project, DH project that deals into that. But apart from that, the curriculum is structured in such a way that they are practical modules, and on these practical modules, you have modules that are dealing with impacting the students, with teaching them, the DH tools, For example, within the curriculum, we teach a number of tools, from text analysis tools, from, GIS, videographic tools, and so forth. And we also have a module that, is dedicated to programming, which teaches them around programming. But we also have theoretical modules that equip them with the fundamentals of DH. What is DH? What is and what is the digital in DH? What is the humanities in DH? And what is the history of DH? And we also have a module that gets into the research methods in DH, the digital methods. But what is very fascinating when you read, literature on DH is that it's always, attesting to the fact that DH is interdisciplinary in scope and methodological in nature, in the sense that the character of DH is methodological. So we place so much value on methodology, methodological skills that are digitally, spurred. So, so in general, we are saying the landscape of digital humanities is, ever, growing, but we need to set up, knowledge infrastructures that, can actually be evaluated through ethical and community-centered standards, where we co-create the knowledge, we, collaborate with communities, and using these computational methods in that process. So I think, we need, in understanding African digital humanities, it's important that we understand what is influencing, what can influence this, this process, or the development of African DH. We have post-colonial, archival landscape, where we have, which is actually inheriting from, colonial classifications and access, where, some of the information we have from our histories is actually stored in European, universities, European libraries, and we want to make use of that. So we need to come up with measures of how we can access, or how we can break, certain barriers we have in the current. But we also need to make use of the linguistic diversity we have in Africa. I think in Africa we have more than 2,500 languages, and we have various language families, which we can utilize, because currently we have languages, for example, that are called, the low language resources, because they are not digitally present, or they are their digital presence is limited. So we have an equal digital presence, which we need to, address and get involved as digital humanists. And in that context, we also need to be aware or conscious of the politics behind, building language resources. And it calls for us, to establish, even DX centers that are dedicated, for instance, to the digitization of our languages. I commend the South Africans, for doing that with SADELA. Then there are also issues that have been raised, of data sovereignty and cultural governance, where we need to, traverse, issues of consent, access, and decision making for cultural materials. But we also must be aware of the issues of infrastructural constraints, where we have constraints in that context. I think we, in most African countries, we still even have, the problem of internet connectivity, the digital divide, and so forth. So we need to be aware of that and see how we can partner even with colleagues, with resources in this regard, and also encourage our governments to invest into this, so that we address the disparities in terms of both digital resources and also training. Sometimes, the hesitancy to get into the digital world is because people have not been trained, so we need to embark in such, exercise. And I'm glad that, with the team, Augustine and others, we've come up with, the African Digital Humanities, hub that, will help in driving this this development. Then we also must be aware that we need to look at institutional, incentive and academic legitimacy, where we must be able to come up with measures of evaluating, the criteria of these DH, projects, and see that, we are contributing to that. So there are various, diverse approaches in African digital humanities. You can see that, at various levels, people are coming up with a number of, projects, projects that are into community archiving, where there's, co-designing, co-recording, and preserving local, traditions. I've been involved in, I think since 2012, I've been involved with the Living Tongue Institute of Endangered Languages, which is an American lexicographic firm. It's an e-lexicographic firm that has been involved in the digitization of endangered languages, and we work with, communities to come up with living dictionaries, digital dictionaries. And, it was part of my first postdoctoral fellowship when I finished my PhD in 2019. So there are also projects in the context of heritage digitization as well. Then, people are coming up with multilingual popora as well. I think, the recent example is the Masakane project. But apart from that, we have had African Languages Research Institute at the University of Zimbabwe, which came up with the Alex, project. Even Sadela has also been involved in that context. But there are also projects in the context of text mining and analytics, where people are analyzing, historical documents, literary texts, and different kind of texts as well. Then there are also researches that have been happening in the context of GIS, GIS, where people are looking at, spatial memory, and so on. So, but in doing this, we must be aware of the principles of ethical and sustainable DH as we work on African digital humanities. We need to co-design and have a shared research authority where we engage communities from a problem definition to output, framing. And the other, ethical, principle is that we must be right aware, digitization and governance, where we implement nuanced consent, access and licensing rules. I had my brother who asked Prof. Rockwell around the issues of ethics. We need to think seriously about that. The other thing is metadata is collaborative, interpretation, where we co-develop, schemas and allow community input. Community input is usually very important because, for instance, if you are working on a multimodal, digitization project, be it in the area of NLP, you always want to engage with for instance, the phonetics and phonology, where you are recording, how, those sounds are, pronounced, and it is the community that can give you such kind of information that is, authentic and relevant. The other thing is we need to do, capacity building for operational responsibility, where we train, for, long-term management and stewardship. I'm glad that, the African Digital-Humanities, team we have, led by my brother Augustine, has started this process. Yeah, I think we have had, a hackathon before, where we got trained around, Voyant tools and Spiral by Prof. Rockwell. That's commendable, and we need to, continue and even go beyond that. And the other thing is sustainability and long-term stewardship, where we plan beyond grants for data preservation and governance. So we need to collaborate even with colleagues from the global north, especially in terms of finding grants for the digitization of what we already have in Africa. So this is my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reggemore. And this is very insightful. And we are going to now take questions and answers.